Hey everyone, welcome to the Tom's Hardware Podcast for October 19th, 2021. As always, I'm Tom's Hardware Editor in Chief Abram Pilch, joined by Associate Editor Les Pounder, Raspberry Pi expert Ash Hill, and Richard from Raspberry Pi is joining us again to talk about a really exciting new announcement today. Amazing, because when I told my son about it, who's 9, he was really blown away because we're actually bringing together the amazing worlds of Raspberry Pi and Lego. So tell us what this is.
Yeah, it's great to be back on the show. Thanks for having me back on. So, the Raspberry Pi Build Hat, which we announced and launched today, here it is. This is the result of a collaboration that's been going on for about 2 years now with our friends at Lego Education. And the idea behind it is really Lego Education do and produce a whole range of Lego kits that are designed to be used by schools and by educators. And they know that they're really powerful, and that the teachers who like to use them in the classroom often want to extend what they can do with them beyond what's possible with just the Lego and the Lego Spike hub controller that comes with those kits. So they came to us and said, it'd be really cool, wouldn't it, if we could add in some Raspberry Pi support for all the great Lego devices that they make. And so over the last couple of years, that's exactly what we've been doing. We've been working with our friends at Lego to produce the Build Hat, which now supports all the motors and sensors that you can get with the Lego Spike education sets.
Wow, amazing. So we wanted to ask what specific Lego parts can you use with it?
So with the Spike education sets, you get a whole bunch of great things. You get things like a medium-sized motor. You get a really big, large motor. You get an ultrasonic distance sensor. You get a color sensor as well. And the one thing that I haven't got because it's plugged in is a force sensor, which you can use as a button. So all of those devices that come with the Lego Spike kit are supported right now. You can also get very similar looking motors in some other Lego sets. So for example, here's the motor from the Spike set, and here's the motor from the Lego Mindstorms Robot Inventor kit. And as you can see, they're identical except for the color. So if you've got some of these motors, they're supported as well. Also, you can buy other Lego motors, which, like these ones here, which are more sort of, I think of as more traditional chunky Lego because they have lots of studs on top. So they're easier to build into, to build with regular bricks. And those are all supported as well. The key thing basically is if your Lego device has one of these LPF2 connectors on it, which are the new version of the Lego connectors they use for the devices, then they should be supportable by the Build Hat.
So you say, just for those who have stuff like this lying around, new version, do you know how new it is and how you could tell an LPF2 connector from an older one?
Yeah, so the Spike kits all came out last year, I think that's right. And the same with the Lego Mindstorms Robot Inventor. Prior to that, there was the Boost kits that came out that also had that new connector. And remember, this is all from the Lego Education brand, but even in the normal retail things, there was like a remote control Batmobile that came out.
I asked because that's exactly what I have.
Yeah,
the remote control. I have the Boost kit and the remote control Batmobile from when my son was younger. The Boost kit was his first like real programming kit of any kind before he even was able to get into Raspberry Pi, before he could read, right? Like for those listening and watching, if you've got a really young child, I strongly recommend the Boost kit. It's really good for kids who can't read yet because it's complete. There's no words unless they've changed it recently. There's no words in the app at all. So, I mean, first of all, you don't need to read. It's language. It doesn't matter what language your child speaks either, right? because it just like pictures and shows you where to drag the blocks to code. And so it's really good at like teaching kids basic programming concepts and really building on skills. You just start with like, oh, this really tiny thing, you're just making one motor move or whatever, and then you've got like a cat robot you can build. And I mean, depending which kit you get, to now the Star Wars one, which is really cool. Anyway, so we have all that lying around, and as my son got older, he wanted to do more and more with it. And it was like, well, there's only so much you can do with it because you can't program it. You can only use Lego's programming language to do it, and it's got a set of blocks. And he and I were out there. There've been around for years a few Python libraries we could use Bluetooth hacking to like hack into the Move Hub, which is the central brain of it, for those who don't know. And you could sort of use another computer like a Pi, for example, to send Bluetooth commands to your Lego Boost thing. But if you could take the motors and sensors that can connect to the Move Hub or the Power Up Hub in the case of like the Batmobile or whatever, then you could do a lot more with them. So it's really cool to think that finally you can just direct connect it to your Raspberry Pi.
Sure. So the stuff that isn't supported is what you probably know of as the old EV3 Mindstorms motors.
Mhm.
If they're motors that look like this, their connector is like, it's kind of an RJ12 connector on the end there. So those ones aren't supported. You can't physically plug those into the build hack. But all the new kind of stuff, if it isn't supported in the library right now, then we will be adding support for it.
That's good to know.
Wow, that's fantastic. So you don't have to spend a boatload of money to get these Lego parts, because I know, for example, like the Power Up motor, you can buy separately for like $15 or something. So that's, it's not, if you just want a few pieces here and there. So that's really fantastic. How long has this been in development?
I think the first time I went with a bunch of colleagues over to Billund in Germany was the start of 2019. So it's been a long collaboration. We went over there and we were just really blown away with the Lego education folk, because they were so similar to us in their outlook. Right? They're really keen on helping young people learn about science, engineering, and programming, but doing that in a really playful way. Do it by building things and learning. And that's at the heart of Lego, right? Building things. And it's the same with Raspberry Pi. We're all about making stuff. So when we went over there, we naturally felt aligned with those guys and wanted to think of a really good way that we could work together, which is where the build hack came from. The idea that you can buy these great Lego education kits, but then when you've kind of gone through all the projects that come with those kits, you can add a Raspberry Pi into the mix and start doing all sorts of other things. So you can add in conventional electronics, connect those to the GPIO pins as normal. You can use the fact that the Raspberry Pi is a full computer to connect to online web APIs and download data. And one of the other things we've launched today with the Raspberry Pi Build Hack is 5 educational projects on our website that help support people in getting started with the Build Hack and doing some of those cool things and exploring some of those ideas.
Oops, I was going to say, do you have any examples to show us?
So I haven't got any working here. I have got an example of just connecting some electronics and stuff on, if you'd like to see that.
Yeah.
Let me just share my screen then, if I can do that. Yeah. Okay, so if you can add my screen on. Cool, so what I've got here on my desk, I've got like a bunch of the Lego sensors all connected in. I've got my build hack here. You can also see attached to the Raspberry Pi is a Raspberry Pi high quality camera, which is up here. So I'm filming and running all of this on a single Raspberry Pi. You can also see on my screen I've got some Python code. I'm using our build hack library and the standard NeoPixel library just to support this stream of NeoPixels here. So fingers crossed for a live demo. Let's just run this. Let's see if that's working. Oh, hang on, I probably need to stop it first. There we go. Again. Oh, come on, curse of a live demo. What's going on?
It strikes again.
I know what's going on. I haven't pressed the button. There you go. You've got to press the start button. That helps. There we go. So now the motor's gone to its resting position. And you can see this bright light here is the color sensor.
Mm-hmm.
So if I take a Lego block, like a green block here, put that in front of the color sensor and press the button again, I've now programmed a green color. And I can turn on this ring of neopixels just by turning the motor. Because the great thing about these motor encoders, is they have rotary encoders on there, so you can measure the position of the motor there. You see, as I turn the motor, I'm illuminating or turning off some of the lights on the ring. If I want to pick another color, I can take my block off, swap it for another block, press the button again, and you can see the lights have now changed color. I think this is kind of a cool demo, right? Because you've got all the Lego stuff here working, but then I've just poked a tool header through my build hat, connected the wires to the NeoPixels, and that's all there.
Very nice.
Away. You've integrated the world of Raspberry Pi with the world of Lego.
Yeah,
this as well, Richard. You've got in the imports, you've got the first line import board. Now that's a CircuitPython library.
Yeah.
So you're mixing Python, CircuitPython, and the build hat.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
That's good. And that's the strength of the Python libraries, right? The ecosystem is so good for mix and matching this kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
So one question that's kind of raised when Les and I were talking about it is, do you have a recommended way of connecting your Pi physically to a Lego build, like a good case or something like that with studs on it?
So one of the other cool things that Lego has brought to this collaboration is this thing you might have seen called the Maker Plate. So this comes in the Lego Spike expansion kit. And it looks like a sort of standard Lego thing, but the cool thing is you can just connect a Raspberry Pi to it, right? All the holes on the back here are specifically designed so that you can add in a Raspberry Pi. And that includes a full-size Pi like this one, but even the Pi Zero will nicely fit in there, and even the camera boards. So this is a great way of mounting your Raspberry Pi into your Lego build. And I've certainly seen some great Lego robots that people have already built with a Raspberry Pi involved, and they've had to kind of hot glue the Raspberry Pi into the Lego.
Yeah,
it's a horrible way of mounting it.
It's a problem.
It's a really nice way of doing that. So that's a great thing that's available in the Spike Prime expansion set. And in fact, that's the only place you can get it right now, in the Spike Prime expansion set. And the other cool thing about this is the first Lego element. An element is what Lego call all their things. This is the first Lego element that Lego have produced that's designed to allow you to connect something to Lego that isn't more Lego. If that makes sense.
Right? Yeah.
They've done this. So this is a big thing for Lego, right? This collaboration.
Wow, that's fantastic. So how do you power it? How do you power the hat and all the Lego elements?
So if you just want to, say, read from motor encoders or use the force sensor, then you can just power the Pi normally via the USB jack, and the 5-volt rail is enough to power those devices. If you want to drive a motor and make it turn, they need more power. They need about 8 volts, give or take. And the same with the ultrasonic rangefinder and the color sensor. So for that, you need, and if you look on the build hat, you can see there's a barrel jack socket there. You need to supply 8 volts plus or minus 10% in order to drive those other devices. And you can buy, a standard power supply with those barrel jack connectors on, but also we've also produced the official Raspberry Pi build hat power supply, which is what I'm using on my desk there, which is specifically designed to go with the build hat and provide the right amount of power to drive as much as you like to plug into the build hat.
Wow, fantastic. And what if you want to make a battery operated creation?
Yeah, you can do that as well. The recommended way of doing that right now is to get 5 AA batteries, put those in a holder with either with a barrel jack on, or use a chock block to connect your wires to one of those barrel jack adapters, and then connect that instead. So 5 AA cells in a holder is the best way of doing it.
Wow, fantastic. So now people are really going to be able to bring their Lego robots to life and have a much better way. It really marries the two things that you need, because sometimes it's hard to get the parts to build a good physical robot to go with your Raspberry Pi. And there's limits with Lego by itself on what you can program. So now you have the two things people love most. Lego, two things a lot of people love most: Raspberry Pi and Lego.
Exactly.
Together.
I mean,
it can't get better.
You can't. This is the ideal project for me as a Raspberry Pi fan and a Lego fan. This has been just the greatest thing to have worked on. And the thing that I really love is, Lego gives you that ability to rapidly prototype things. If you want to try out a shape or a design for a robot, you can do that really easily in Lego. And if it doesn't work, you can take it apart again. You don't have to laser cut stuff or 3D print it or glue it together. So being able to build these kind of robotics projects really quickly and program them with the Raspberry Pi is just amazing.
Yeah, that really is. So Les, you've had a chance to play with the build hat and work on some projects with it. What have you found?
I found it's a really good platform for just messing around to see what ideas work. So I'm lucky enough to have the Spike Prime kit, which I got at the hackathon nearly 2 years ago now, where Richard was there as well. He was across the table from me that day. And I enjoy messing around with it simply because it's not just a block-based language to mess around with. There's also now the build hat to use, but the Spike Prime Hub also ran MicroPython as well, which is quite good to mess around with. The benefit of having the Pi and Lego together, quite simply, is you've got the best of both worlds. You've got the ease of use of Lego. You can tear it apart. You made a mistake. Put it all back together again and see what happens. But you also got the expandability of Raspberry Pi. You've got all these add-on boards that you can use and mess around with to build a new project and sort of mash them all together and see what happens, which is what I've been doing. So I'll go to my screen. So you can see on the screen right now, this is the Spike software. This is Lego software to control the Spike Hub, which is just here. And I've got a very quick demo just set up. I'll just switch over to that so I can control it. It literally just controls the hub to turn the center button light red, which is there. It'll run this motor, which is connected to output B for one rotation. It'll scroll the PiCast across the little screen here. Then it'll show an approximation of a Raspberry. I'm not very arty, so it's the best I could do. It'll then go anti-clockwise or counterclockwise for the states. It'll wait a second, change the lights to blue, and then wait a second, and the loop just goes around 10 times. So I'll just put this on now. And you can see how easy it is to run. It's like using Scratch. Really easy to play around with. But for children who are a little more advanced, they want something a bit more powerful. So something like Python is ideal. So having the Raspberry Pi, a nice cheap SBC to play with, along with this kit, is ideal. So let's show that. So I'm going to go now to the overhead. 2 live demos in one show. What's going to go wrong? We'll soon find out. So this is now running on the build hat. It's very similar to Richard's project. In fact, we remarked about this earlier today when we were talking about it. We have build hat in the center. Ports A and B are connected. One goes to the force sensor. This is the plunger button here. And here is the color sensor. And talking about cases for the Pi, this is a $10 Raspberry Pi 3 case that I picked up from Amazon that I've connected using a few of the black pegs to the board. It's on like a little gimbal, so I can move it around if I need to tidy the wires. All this rig does is it senses color using the color sensor. So I'm going to give it some breadboards to look at. So here's a green breadboard. If I press the plunger, you'll see blinked, which is from Pimoroni, connected to GPIO here. And it's lighting up green. The camera doesn't pick it up too well, unfortunately. But I promise you it is green. Here is a foam pad from your soldering iron set. Same again. Press that and we get a blue light. So really, all this sensor is doing is just reading the reflected light. You can see the outputs just in the bottom right of the screen. It's seeing the reflected light and it's returning an RGB value. And then using that RGB value to tell blinked to make the lights that color. And that is in 24 lines of code, 22 lines of code. There you go. That's how simple it is. So it's good to see Lego and Raspberry Pi being used together in something such as this. But obviously, something more elaborate, much more impressive. But being used together to build really cool projects really quickly.
Wow. Amazing. Can folks buy this today?
Yeah, they should be able to. I think obviously the world is struggling with logistics and supply chains and getting things to resellers, but they should be able to at least pre-order them and get them within the next few days. Yeah, definitely on the build hat. Seeing your breadboard there, Les, reminded me. The other cool thing about the build hat is it's got a perfect space on top just to fit on a small breadboard. So if you want to add that into your project, it fits on there really well.
Yeah, it's almost as if you planned it, really, isn't it?
It is almost as if we planned it. And in fact, I've got one of the projects that we have in our that we've released is building a robot there, and you can see I've got one kit at the front there, a nice Raspberry Pi robot. This is battery powered. If you look inside, you can see the battery pack just in there.
Oh yeah.
And then that's got the build hat on top with the breadboard on top to control the lights and indicators on the robot. So
very cool. That's a nice robot. It's nice and frothy, that.
It is, yeah. Actually, I've got one here. The battery pack, to answer the question, this is what you need. You want one of these. So a 5-cell AA holder that you can connect, some kind of adapter to make it attach to a barrel jack on, and that will be really easy for your power.
Will that also power the Pi?
Yeah, it will. Yeah, exactly.
So you don't need to separately power the Pi and the hat and the motors. Fantastic. So that's like another bonus feature is that you have a way of converting a battery pack to power your Pi, because normally you can't do that without some type of a converter. So that's a nice little add-on. So I know, Les, you said that you have to use, in order to use this to access the GPIO pins, in addition to this, you have to use an extender, correct?
That's right, yeah. From the Raspberry Pi through to the Blinks, I've got an extended header. It's about 1 inch long, the extended pins, and it goes through the build hat, and sticks out for the Blink to connect to. That doesn't come in the box, unfortunately, which is a shame. It would have been great, but they're not too much to spend, really. I think they're about £2 or £3 to get a set of them. I think I found a set on Amazon for about $8 for 4 of them, so not too bad price-wise. You do get some standoffs or spacers in the box, which are necessary for the build hat. I noticed during testing, I didn't have any spacers in the box, unfortunately. They must have fallen out somewhere. But without the spacers, the DC jack, if I just go to my overhead camera there, the DC jack here is precariously close to the audio-video composite jack. And you don't really fancy 8 bolts going across there. That'd be a really bad day. So if you use, I think it's 9mm M2.5 spacers that come in the box, you're absolutely fine.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got my spacers on here. And I think the really important thing for people to remember is this is the top of the build hat, right? Mm-hmm. So unlike a lot of hats where all the components are on the top, they're actually on the bottom here, which leaves that nice space for the breadboard. And the other thing, of course, we should mention is that the main chip on here, you're never going to see it close enough on my camera, but the main controlling chip at the heart of the build hat is the RP2040. So this is our second product that uses our own RP2040 silicon on here, which is another thing we're super excited about.
So it's the second product to use RP2040, first one being the Pico. Is that
exactly,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you're dog fooding now, you're using your own stuff to make your own boards, which is interesting. What's RP2040 actually doing, though? Is it some sort of interface?
So if you look in your Spike Prime hub, all the Lego hubs use an STM32 microcontroller in there to basically be the brains of the board. And we originally were going to copy that idea and use the STM32. Then, of course, the global silicon shortage hit, and we worked out that if we were going to stick with doing that, we'd maybe be able to make like 20 build hats this time next year. So instead, we pivoted and respun the design to include the RP2040, which we therefore can get a lot more of, which means we can meet the demand we know we're going to have for this.
That's interesting. Well, a question from the community I got today on Twitter. Someone asked, is it possible to stack build hats on top of each other? Because they asked the question because the build hat's got 4 of the LPF2 connectors, but the hubs have got around about 6. I know mine's got 6.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could stack more to have more LPF2 connectors.
The way the Raspberry Pi talks to the build hat is through a serial connection.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, you can't really have two serial connections to two separate devices easily on a Raspberry Pi. So you can't stack two build hats together. You could stack a sense hat on top of the build hat, for example, because that uses I2C. But generally, you can't stack them there.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what are some of the coolest things that you like, Ash? What would you do with this if you had one of these?
I don't know. I don't have any Lego kits. I'm sitting here thinking about it, and I really need to get my hands on some of these kits you guys are playing with, because honestly, I didn't realize they had so many sensors and servos and stuff that kids could build with. But I'd probably put something together for my nephews and see what they can come up with first, and then build on that. And like you were saying, Avram, open them up to the next level of programming, which is, here's what Python is. Here's some libraries. Check these out. Use it as a bridge.
It's 2021, right? So there's Lego is all about the motors and sensors now. I want to see what people do with some of the crazy power up kits that have come out that use this connector. So I don't know if any of you guys have seen, but there was a really incredible roller coaster kit that Lego came out with a couple of years back, and the kit, I think you have to buy the power up after the fact to turn it into a working roller coaster. But it's huge. You have like I wouldn't say life size, but desk size, right? Roller coaster. And I've seen it like at the Lego store in action, where you can have it, basically move the car and do the whole thing. So I can totally imagine somebody taking that, adding the build hat and a Pi to it, and then doing some really wild stuff with the roller coaster based on sensor input. Just like Raspberry Pi maintains backward compatibility across generations, you can still use, right? You could still use this hat with, I think, anything from like a Pi A plus, right? If you really wanted to. Well, think about the backward compatibility of Lego pieces. My son is using my we won't hint at how old I am, but let's say my Lego Space Legos from the 80s with his Lego Boost stuff, and they all click together. So you can just imagine like people creating stuff with like really old Lego kits, and then adding these new elements to it, and then taking whole other ecosystems of electronics and bringing them in. Because if you have a Pi, you can bring in a Pimoroni breakout garden. You could bring in a Stemma or a Grove stuff, right? So it's really, and you, of course, you have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So it's just wild to think of what somebody could do with this. In fact, oh man, who is probably, if they didn't hear about this already, as soon as they hear about it, they're going to do something. That our friends at Surrogate TV are going to make something crazy out of this.
Yeah.
Rich, are you familiar with Surrogate TV?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I can totally imagine them taking their next like remote control robot that you have to control and making it a Lego Raspberry Pi combo that people can control online. So it's just like there's so much that you can do with this. So it's a really amazing thing that we're seeing, and like what people do with it. We're probably going to be covering projects with people writing about using this, for years, because they're going to find new and exciting things that they can do with it that are just really super cool.
I said, we've got 5 projects to support the launch that we've published on our website. And my absolute favorite is one that my colleague, who's an absolute genius, called James Robinson, made. And it's a robot face where the Lego motors power the eyebrows of the face and also control the shape of the mouth. It's got 2 8x8 LED matrices for eyes, and then a Raspberry Pi camera on it. So what the project teaches you how to do is to retrain an image recognition machine learning model to recognize various objects and then change the expression of the face based on what you show the camera. So, for example, if you show it some vegetables, it will make a frowning face. If you show it something nice, like a donut, it will smile. If you show it something scary, like a spider, it looks all scared. And I just think it looks so cool. I never get tired of playing with it.
That's a Jim Henson level project.
It really is. It's so good.
That's cool.
At the Raspberry Pi store in Cambridge, we've got a working demo there. So if anyone's in the Cambridge area, they can pop in.
Oh, so now you people have reason to visit the store. They can see this amazing demo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
be inspired to do things on their own. Well, thank you so much for the inspiration, Richard, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in to watch and those who tune in after. We didn't get to promote this this appearance as well as we normally do because this news was under embargo till this morning, so we couldn't put it out there. We couldn't really put out there what we were going to be talking about. So always stay tuned in because there can always be surprises. Anyway, we will see everybody next Tuesday at our normal time of 7:30 p.m. UK time, 2:30 p.m. US time. And we'll see you then. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.